Hi, welcome back to Storytime with Angel. Today we have a story from Less Than Three Press. This is The Diary by R.M. Jane. And this is a gay historical. It's a Victorian historical, so that kind of gives you an idea of some of the issues the protagonists are going to be facing, since being gay during the Victorian era was sometimes even a dangerous thing, and usually an illegal thing depending on where you were. So this story, we have two young men who've just finished school, and let me read the blurb for you here. John Bridley has been enamored with Paul Duvant, son of a rich American merchant, since the moment he laid eyes on him. But though the love proves mutual, John is a marquess, second son of a duke, and as such has a duty to his family. When Paul has to return to his homeland, John's duty forbids him from following Paul, and the lovers part ways. 2 years later, John finds a mysterious diary dated from the last century. Okay, so our scene here, this is after the end of their last term at Eastminster. So Paul and John are invited by their friend Brighton to a masked ball. But school is over, and Paul doesn't know what's going to become of their new relationship now that they've finished. But here we are at the ball. Is everything all right? He asked Paul. I was just having some fun with Brighton. He's just learned the rumors Miss Edworth has been circulating around. He shouldn't care about that. He's above such stupid rumors. Of course John would think that. He was a god, so perfect, so gently mannered, that nobody would believe any rumors about him. But mere mortals like himself and Brighton had to dispel such gossip if they wanted to still be accepted into polite society. The fireworks are about to begin. Would you care to go for a moment to the garden? John asked him. Please, was Paul's reply. He needed the fresh air, his guise of a Canadian trapper being rather stuffy. He thought his choice of costume reasonable, as he didn't want to look ridiculous in an exotic costume, but it was rather inconvenient on a summer evening. John didn't seem to suffer any discomfort, even if his tunic was warmer than Paul's, a tunic that showed his body to his best advantage. He had filled out considerably since the first time they met. Not that Paul hadn't, but where he was built all over and of average height, John had grown tall and lean, on all broad shoulders with a fine waist and long legs. They went on the terrace to wait for the fireworks while the other guests were still lingering in the ballroom. Lamps cast a dim light on the vast gardens, and the sky was filled with stars. John took off his helmet and shook his head, obviously enjoying the night breeze. Then he put it down on the stone balustrade before turning to face Paul. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked Paul, who was still deciding which was more beautiful, the stars in the night sky or the eyes of the man standing before him. Yes, Paul answered with a smile. He longed to caress the blonde locks, now freed from the constraint of the helmet, but he couldn't do it, so he sighed and scooted a bit closer to John, just enough to sense the heat coming off his body. Oh, they're starting, look! John told him with childish excitation. As soon as the first explosion sounded, the terrace filled, making Paul wonder how the medium-sized space could have been enough for all the people in the ballroom. But he wouldn't complain. It was so cramped he was forced against John, and he enjoyed their brief closeness while he could. When the fireworks ended, most of the guests returned to their dance, but John remained, and so did Paul. John seemed deep in thought. How about Emperor? I beg your pardon? The horse! What about naming him Emperor? Paul laughed softly. Here his mind was filled with lascivious thoughts, while John thought only of horses. They had gone off to Tattersall's that afternoon, and John helped him choose a horse. They chose a wonderful thoroughbred, even if John preferred Arabians himself. Isn't it a most beautiful summer, Paul? There are a myriad of things to do. I don't know where to begin. Now that you mention it, John, Mr. Duvant wrote me, asking what were my projects for the future. I found myself quite at a loss at what to do, he said. He didn't expect John's hand to shoot out from the balustrade and grip his shoulder. What do you mean at a loss? You'll be staying with me, of course. I will? Paul looked John in the eye to see if he meant what he said. We're going to Oxford together. Then after that it will be the grand tour. John seemed very sure. "Certainly your father won't object to that." His tone said it all. He wanted to be with him. A wave of happiness wafted over Paul. He had been afraid that after finishing boarding school they would drift apart. But no, it seemed he had caught the fancy of Marquess, and he intended to keep him for a long time to come. Getting his father's approval for Oxford would not prove very difficult, as it was his wish for Paul to keep rubbing shoulders with the finest of English society. Now he only had to go home for a bit and return before university started. Rubbing his hands gleefully, he chanced to glance at the terrace. The few guests who had lingered after the fireworks had vanished. It was their chance. Paul tugged on John's hand, stirring him toward the staircase that led to the garden downstairs. The moonlight was shadowed by the clouds, making the garden seem mysterious, even with the few lamps adorning its sides. They ventured deep inside the maze, where nobody could spot them. "Paul, are you trying to compromise me?" John said in jest. "Your reputation is in sage hands, and if someone contested that, I would be happy to step up to the plate and propose," answered Paul, who very much wished he could do that very thing. Alas, it was wishful thinking on his part. Then John's arm seized him and pulled him close. "Dear sir, I'm afraid I've never been kissed before. Would you be gentle with me?" John's eyes were twinkling. "Rest assured, my love, I will be very, very gentle and thorough." They kissed, slow and sweet at first. Then it became a heated battle, each tongue fighting for dominance. John's hand crept to Paul's breeches, caressing the bulge there, and Paul stifled a moan. He writhed under John's careful ministrations, yielding to the tongue and the hand that played him so masterfully. He forgot everything but John's presence, John's heat and passion. For Paul, only he existed anymore, until pleasure flooded him, carrying him to the seventh heaven. When they broke apart, Paul was fighting for breath. He looked at John, who had not even a hair out of place, and a smug smile plastered on his lips. "Are you happy now? My clothes are wrinkled, and my trousers surely appear damp. How am I to appear again at the ball?" He complained good-naturedly, but he wouldn't have it any other way. He would take John any way he could get him. John looked at him hungrily, and then appeared thoughtful. "You're right. I don't want anyone to see you in this state. The tousled Paul belongs to me alone," John said fiercely. "How about we go up to our rooms?" "We can't leave like that." Paul's tone was indignant. "Yes, we can. Brighton will understand. Besides," he whispered, "I have a situation down there that needs your immediate attention. You go ahead. I'll be following you shortly." Looking at Paul's retreating back, John strolled calmly toward the terrace, enjoying the fresh air and trying to calm himself. The moment he saw Paul in that costume, he had been aroused. Paul in any form or outfit was arousing, but this particular costume enhanced his raw wildness. He appeared like those pioneers of old, ready to face earth and sky to get what they wanted. Then Paul had led him to the garden to have a bit of fun, and John lost it then and there and attacked him. The combined pleasure of doing it outdoors and Paul being in disguise made him discharge his weapon at the same moment as Paul. But he wasn't going to confess to that. He found it difficult to express his feelings, to tell Paul how gorgeous he found him, that he loved him so much it hurt, that he wanted to keep him in a box and keep him all for himself. Day after day he was growing afraid that when the moment came to marry he wouldn't go through with it, but would escape with Paul instead and go live somewhere no one knew them. The scandal it would cause! His mother would die of shame, he was sure, and his father would never forgive him. John even pictured himself erasing John's name from the family tree tapestry hung on the main residence hall. The prospect of marrying was as daunting as that of an elopement with Paul, though. Already he couldn't even stomach lying with another man, much less a woman. God help him. Alrighty. So that's The Diary by Armin Jane. And that is available from Less Than Three Press. Of course, it's on Amazon and all the usual suspects as well. We'll get the information down on the blog for you. But that's sounds like a really interesting story. I'd be intrigued to see how that all turns out, because it seems like a hopeless situation, doesn't it? We'll see you next time with a bit of a short story on Thursday. And for now, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening.